Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is Bloomberg Businessweek with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, by now we've all seen the dramatic footage from Sunday's drone attack. Ukraine going after different assets of Russia's military deep inside Russian territory. In fact, Carol, by early 2025, this was remarkable when I was preparing for this, drones were accounting to 60 to 70% of the damage and destruction caused to Russian equipment in the war. This is according to data from the UK-based think tank, the Royal United Services Institute.
I gotta say, the way we think about warfare has definitely changed dramatically. And this is where Florian Seibel comes in. He's a former German Army helicopter pilot, an aeronautical engineer who a decade ago founded a company called Quantum-Systems. It makes multi-sensor drones. Now, 90% of its sales go to the military sector, and it's provided thousands of drones to Ukraine specifically. And so we're kind of dying to talk to him.
Florian Seibel joins us from Italy. Florian, good to have you with us. I know there's a little bit of delay. We appreciate you taking the time and staying up a little late in Europe for us on Bloomberg Businessweek Daily. First big question that I have for you is, given what you know about Sunday's drone attack, were any of your drones actually used in that attack?
So what we know, not as in a way that they would act as being the ultimate weapon. All of the drones that we are building are used for ISR missions, which is intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. So that means we are spotting potential targets. So our drones have wings. We have flight time of several hours, and we fly deep into enemy territory. So we spot, and then other type of drones come in.
Do your drones ultimately replace the capabilities of aircraft such as the U-2 spy plane?
Well, there's a reason for every asset to have, and I think mostly war times are times of change and new doctrines are happening, and every war that is coming up will not start as the last one ended. So. I'm not really sure if the next war will be all about drones, but what I can say now, definitely it's a vehicle for Ukraine to fight off Russia, because they did not have enough conventional weapons to take them to the battlefield the way Russia would have expected. So I mean, they were just very curious and using what they have, and that's where we are. This is technology changing the way things happen. Huh?
Well, that's where, Florian, I kind of want to go. I think after that drone strike by Ukraine and Russia, we had so many conversations in the newsroom about, oh my gosh, like warfare just continuing to change very dramatically. My dad and his three brothers all fought in World War II, A lot of man-to-man combat. It was just a very different type of warfare. We've seen the gamification of warfare. How does drones kind of make it safer on one level in terms of not putting people at the kind of right at the top, the front line, if you will, but at the same time make it easier for someone to flip a switch and send drones into combat?
You use the word that describes it quite well, which is gamification. It's using a lot of technology that was spilling over from adjacent industries like cell phone technology. A lot of the small stuff, chips, batteries, cameras that they weren't just not available a few years ago to companies like us. And the cell phone industry basically allowed us all to disrupt classical defense military companies, because now it's available to everybody, and China is very strong in that regard. And I think what has to happen now is we need to rebuild, specifically in the US, but also in Germany and Europe. We need to rebuild the industrial base to be capable of producing thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s of these units. It's not about like a few multi-$100 million aircraft anymore. It's about large numbers, attritable. Right. Platforms. You want to saturate your adversary, and there's companies like Quantum and Anduril in the US that are changing the rules how we play.
Florian, I am curious though, is there somebody, an entity, a country that you will not sell to?
Well, in Germany, all of what we do is very regulated, and so we have a German export control authority, which is called BAFA. which is very much in line with NATO and the German governmental official position. And so we have to fulfill these guidelines and so it's basically impossible for us, from a legal perspective, for example, to sell into countries like Iran and Russia and China. But also, then that's the legal perspective on it. And then we as the founders and we together with our investors have made it very clear that even though if we could sell to certain countries, we have to feel comfortable with that as a company. For example, Saudi Arabia is probably one of those countries that would be quite obvious that we could sell to, but we would probably have a discussion before we would do so.
You mentioned investors. The company is backed by Peter Thiel. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. Before we get there, I want to talk about the opportunity outside of Europe, because for much of the past 3 years, you have been selling your drones to Ukraine, but you did just open a 135,000 square foot facility here in California. What is the opportunity in the U.S. market?
I think that was a very smart decision, to do that, because the U.S. DoD is the single largest Department of Defense in the world, and obviously Europe as a total is about the same size, but it's very fragmented into 26 member state countries. So going to the US and entering that single biggest market was a must-do for us. There were a lot of people saying it's going to be hard for a non-US company to do well, but I think we managed to do so. I've spent 2 years of my life in the US, 1 year in high school, 1 year when I was trained as a professional helicopter pilot in Fort Rucker, Alabama. So I think I picked a little bit up of the way of how America works and what's the life over there and how the people do business. And so I was very lucky to hire an excellent CEO coming from the drone defense industry, and he was setting up Quantum Inc. in Moore Park, and he has been doing incredibly well. And so I think it's not the US or Europe. I think part of our mission is also to, in these uncertain times of what we see at the moment, where the US is trying to break away from Europe, that economic companies that are on the free market act as a glue maybe to get us through these times, because the US has been always the biggest ally to Europe, especially what is coming up tomorrow, D-Day, we want to pay back a little bit here, and so for me it was a natural thing to go to the US.
Okay, so we are Bloomberg, and we are always curious about interesting startups and as they are growing. And as Tim mentioned, you are backed by Peter Thiel. You just raised about $181 million, a financing round, valuing you at more than $1 billion. So kind of going into that unicorn status. When is the IPO? If there is one, will it be Europe? Will it be the United States? What will you guys do?
It's unclear at the moment. Right now we're doing very well. We're probably going to raise 1 or 2 more rounds. Being on the capital market also means you're very transparent in what you do, and it's these big government contracts we are after. They're either 0 or 1, and we don't want to end up being the goal of speculative betting on us or against us on Wall Street. So I think we'll take like 1 or 2 more years, 1 or 2 more financing rounds, and then probably, as we are a German company, we could look into doing a European IPO, or as you said, New York Stock Exchange. Probably depends a little bit also on how well we do with our US facility. As you said, we have heavily invested in a 135,000 square foot. We need to fill that with business. We expect the US government to give us more contracts to pay back that we invest so heavily into the US now. And then it's an open decision, I would say, as of today.
Well, it's always interesting. We talk so much about, here we are in San Francisco, the heart of Silicon Valley, just nearby. Innovation, though, happens around the world. You are based in Munich. How does that startup environment differ there, over in Europe, in Munich specifically, versus maybe elsewhere, versus the United States, for example?
Yeah, so having lived in the United States and having met a lot of U.S. investors in the last 6, 8, 10 years, you can definitely say that the spirit of go big or go home or think big is definitely a part of Silicon Valley culture. Whereas in Germany, we have excellent engineering, I would say, at very decent price and cost of living. So I think there's an advantage for both locations to be. Obviously, especially in the beginning, I was always a little bit jealous looking at the amount and the number of companies that are still being founded in the US. So it's so much more and bigger than Europe. But I think we're catching up. What has happened in the last 2 or 3 years, it's clear for us now in Europe that we are on our own. We need to reinvent ourselves. We need to define who we are, who we want to be in that world. And Germany always has been the place of great world-leading tech companies. I think we have just not had that in the last 1 or 2 decades, and I think it's time to change that again, and we are ready to do that.
Hey, Florian, before we let you go, I know you're focused on these UAVs that are really about reconnaissance, but I want to pick your brain a little bit about the areas of innovation, especially here in the US, because back in March, the US government awarded Boeing the new Air Force F-47 stealth fighter jet. There's sort of a lot of controversy around this because it's still going to be crew-based, though the president did say we'll be able to fly remotely. Should the US right now, or should countries be investing in any crewed aircraft right now, or is the future 100%, in your view, UAV?
I think the future is unmanned. It's definitely about robotics and unmanned systems. The question is, how fast will that happen? I think the UK has just brought up a new defense policy. They call it 20-40-40, saying 20% will be or should be assets, classical assets like there used to be, so manned fighter jets, 40% ISR and intelligence, and 40% unmanned strike capabilities. So I think it's not either or. I think it's a combination, both, but definitely more than we used to see. And I don't know if the F-47 is going to be manned or unmanned. Probably these high-value assets will still be manned, but they will definitely not fly into enemy territory. I think they have a standoff capability, extreme long-range radar range because they're so super expensive. But let's see. It's changing. Maybe in the next war will be not fought on drones. Maybe it's in space.
Or maybe we won't have a war, which would, sorry for you, but it would make me kind of happy.
They do agricultural drones too. It's
so
just
do that.
It's just the mix has been really military focused over the last few years.
Peace would be nice.
It would be. Now you're asking for a lot, Carol.
I know.
Okay.
I always do.
Florian, thanks for joining us. That's Florian Seibel, CEO of Quantum-Systems, joining us from Italy just now. He's also featured in Businessweek's One to Watch in Technology. It's a guide to the people you'll be hearing more about in the near future. So check that out in the current issue of Bloomberg Businessweek.
It's always a great list.